They say betrayal doesn't hit you all at once. It's a slow burn, creeping in through the cracks you never noticed until the whole foundation collapses. Sometimes the person you trust the most isn't just lying to you, they're building a whole other life without you in it. And when that truth surfaces, you have two choices: fall apart or rise. I still remember exactly what I was wearing when my world collapsed. My favorite, worn-out jeans with that oversized navy hoodie Aiden always said, brought out my eyes. Funny how your brain holds on to these random details when everything else is falling apart. Sorry, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Maya Ellis, 33 years old, and until about 8 months ago, I thought I was in a loving, committed relationship with the man I planned to spend my life with, Aiden Walker. Tall, charming, with that crooked smile that made my heart skip. Even after 3 years, we met at a mutual friend's birthday party in Austin, and God, the chemistry was instant. He worked in tech, something with cybersecurity I never fully understood, despite his numerous explanations. I'm a freelance photographer, mostly working events and a few magazine gigs. We were different, but it worked, or so I thought. We'd been living together for almost 2 years in my condo. Not the biggest place, but in a cute corner of downtown, walking distance to that tiny brunch spot where we'd go every Sunday. He always got the avocado toast, extra chili flakes. I got Belgian waffles. Every single Sunday. It's strange how you build these little routines, these foundations, and then one day you realize they were all built on quicksand. You're being dramatic again, Maya. I can almost hear him say it now. That was his favorite criticism, that I was dramatic. Turns out I wasn't nearly dramatic enough, not by a long shot. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when I found out. Nothing special about that day. I'd been racing a deadline for a magazine spread. Aiden was supposedly on a 3-day business trip to Seattle. He traveled a lot for work, sometimes twice a month. I never questioned it. Why would I? Trust was our thing. At least it was my thing. My laptop crashed just as I was exporting the final files. Perfect timing, right? Aiden and I shared a cloud account to back up important stuff, so I grabbed his laptop to pull what I needed. He never minded. We used each other's devices all the time. No passwords, no secrets. Again, trust. I logged into our cloud and noticed a folder I didn't recognize, wedding plans. My heart did this weird little stutter. Was this Aiden planning to propose? We talked about marriage, but always in that someday, not now kind of way. I hesitated maybe 2 seconds before clicking it, half excited, half confused. And then I saw her. Natalie Brooks. Long auburn hair, perfect smile, wearing a massive diamond ring, the kind that throws light from across a room. Dozens of photos. Aiden and Natalie visiting venues. Aiden and Natalie tasting cakes. Aiden and Natalie with an older couple, her parents, presumably, clinking champagne glasses. But it was the dates on the files that broke me. Some went back 18 months. 18 months of my life, gone in an instant. I sat staring at the screen for what felt like hours, my coffee growing cold beside me. There had to be an explanation, right? Maybe she was a client? Maybe it was a branding job? I was reaching for anything that would make sense of what I was seeing. Then I found their wedding website, password protected, of course. But the password? The same one Aiden used for everything, his childhood dog's name. Amateur move, Aiden. Aiden and Natalie joyfully announced their wedding set for October 18th at the Brooks family estate. October 18th? Just over 7 months away. They'd been planning this for nearly a year and a half, right under my nose. While he was building a life with me, he was building a future with her. I scrolled through the site in a daze. Their How We Met story claimed they'd known each other since college, reconnected 3 years ago, and had been together ever since. 3 years. Our entire relationship was a lie. It got worse. Natalie's father, Stephen Brooks, was apparently a big-time venture capitalist in Austin, the same city where Aiden and I lived, had our date nights, walked through Zilker Park, and built what I thought was a life together. And all that time, I did what any normal person would do. I stalked her online. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Her profile was mostly private, but I could still see enough. She came from money. Serious money, the kind that makes people refer to their summer homes, in plural. Suddenly, Aiden's recent promotion at his firm made a whole lot more sense. He'd told me it was all from his hard work and dedication. Now I wondered if it had more to do with his future father-in-law's network. I must have sat there for 3 hours, just scrolling, piecing it all together. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too shocked, too numb. It wasn't until I found a text file titled After Marriage that the tears finally came. It was a list of Aiden's plans for after he married Natalie. A new house in her family's gated community, a better position at one of her father's friends' tech firms, and buried in there, like it was the most natural thing in the world, maintain downtown apartment for work trips, overnights, and Maya. That's when I realized the full scope of his plan. He wasn't going to leave me after the wedding. He was going to keep me, like some dirty secret, some side piece he'd visit when he told his wife he had to stay late. I wasn't even worth breaking up with. I felt myself unraveling, mind racing, heart pounding, lungs struggling to take in air. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. 3 years, countless memories, all dismissed in a single line, like I was no more than a footnote in his future. I ran to the bathroom and threw up everything I had in me. When I looked in the mirror afterward, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Pale, shaking, eyes wide with betrayal. My hands gripped the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, to smash the glass, to rip something apart, anything to reflect the chaos inside me. But deep down, another voice whispered, "You were never his priority. You were just convenient." That realization shattered something even deeper. In that moment, standing in my bathroom with the taste of bile in my mouth, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there. God, was it ever? But now there was resolve too. If Aiden thought he could use me like this, discard me like I meant nothing, then he had seriously underestimated who he was dealing with. I walked back to his laptop, wiped my face, and started taking screenshots. Every photo, every email, every detail of their wedding plans. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with all of it, but I knew one thing for sure. Aiden Walker was going to regret the day he decided to make a fool of Maya Ellis. When Aiden came home from his business trip 2 days later, I was the perfect girlfriend. I greeted him with a kiss, asked about his meetings, even made his favorite meal. All while the screenshots of his betrayal sat burning a hole in my phone. It was the hardest performance of my life, but I pulled it off. "You seem different," he said that night as we got ready for bed. "Everything okay?" I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't touch my eyes. "Just missed you, that's all." And he bought it. That's the thing about liars. They never expect others to play the same game. The next few weeks were a strange kind of torture. Every kiss felt like acid on my lips. Every "I love you" was a blade twisting deeper. But I kept up the act, flawlessly. Meanwhile, I was conducting my own private investigation into the secret life of Aiden Walker and Natalie Brooks. I combed through our credit card statements from the last 2 years. All those business trips? Half of them aligned perfectly with the wedding planning events I'd seen in their shared calendar. That weekend, he said he worked late and crashed at his buddy Jackson's place. He was probably out choosing floral arrangements with Natalie and her parents. He was actually at a tasting menu with Natalie and her parents at Cartwright's, the 5-star restaurant I'd always dreamed of trying, but Aiden said was overpriced and pretentious. One night, while he was showering, I checked his phone and found the messages to Natalie. "Miss you, beautiful. Just a few more months until you're Mrs. Walker." My stomach clenched, but I kept reading. "Apartment situation handled. She doesn't suspect anything." That was me, the apartment situation. 3 years of my life, reduced to a logistical nuisance. I dug deeper. Aiden had always handled our finances, another red flag I'd ignored for too long. When I finally accessed our joint account, what I saw made my blood run cold. He'd been siphoning money for months, small amounts. Nothing outrageous, but enough to cover luxurious weekend getaways with Natalie. Enough to pay for that enormous diamond sitting on her finger. My money. My hard-earned money was helping finance his wedding to someone else. I didn't fall apart this time. Not like before. I sat still, staring through the windshield in the Trader Joe's parking lot as the pieces came together. Who had I even been loving? The man I thought I knew didn't exist. But instead of crumbling, I felt something click into place. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I wanted him to keep thinking I was clueless. If he believed I was still under his spell, it would give me time. Time to prepare, to gather proof, to ensure this betrayal cost him everything. The next morning, I opened a new bank account in my name only and began transferring my money, slowly, discreetly. I documented every cent he had funneled from our shared account. I reached out to a lawyer friend and posed everything as a hypothetical. What counts as financial fraud between unmarried partners? Turns out, quite a lot. I also began preparing myself for the storm. Picked up extra photography gigs, stashed away every spare dollar. Built an emergency fund. If I was going to detonate my life, and his, I needed a parachute. Over the following weeks, Aiden grew even more distant. More late nights at the office. More unexplained absences. One night he came home with actual lipstick on his collar. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. "Tough day at work?" I asked sweetly. "You have no idea?" He muttered, rubbing his neck, right where I saw the smudge of foundation. But even that wasn't the worst part. What hurt the most was realizing how effortlessly I had faded into the background of his life. Later, I found photos of them at his parents' anniversary party, the same weekend he claimed to be at a financial summit in Boston. His mother, who had never warmed to me, looked radiant next to Natalie. The perfect family. That part pierced deeper than I cared to admit. Then, about 3 months after I discovered everything, I stumbled on a file in his email. Wedding arrangements with a catering company. And just like that, the door to my plan opened wide. They were short-staffed and looking for extra servers, for that day only. I could hardly believe my luck. Using a different name and my friend's mailing address on the application, I applied for the job. With a fabricated resume stacked with fake catering gigs, I secured a spot as one of the servers for the Brooks Walker wedding. Aiden had never been the type to notice service staff at events. He always looked through servers, never at them. With the right disguise, I knew he wouldn't recognize me. As the wedding date crept closer, I continued collecting more evidence. I found out Aiden had been seeing Natalie long before he met me. Their relationship had never ended. He just added me into the mix. I found emails where he and his friends joked about the setup. Apparently, I was the fun, artsy girlfriend who kept things spicy. She was the polished, pedigreed wife material. In one email that hit me like a sucker punch, he told a friend I was great in bed and fun to be around, but not exactly the kind of girl you bring home to the hill country. Meanwhile, Natalie was described as the ideal corporate partner, even if a little stiff. His master plan? Marry Natalie for her last name and lifestyle, and keep me on the side for thrills. He genuinely believed I'd be okay with that downgrade, from girlfriend to mistress. That's how little he thought of me. What Aiden never understood was that I wasn't just some throwaway side story in his carefully curated narrative. I was writing my own, and his betrayal, it had just handed me the perfect plot twist. As October drew near, I finalized my plan. I compiled everything, photos, texts, bank transfers, into what I mockingly called my betrayal Bible. I practiced my tray-carrying technique at home, balancing flutes of sparkling cider until my wrist ached. I bought a high-end brunette wig and colored contacts. I even trained my voice, posture, and walk until I was someone unrecognizable. The week before the wedding, Aiden told me he'd be in San Francisco for a tech conference. The wedding was set for Saturday. He said he'd be back by Tuesday, probably planning to show up at my door with some cheap souvenir and a tale about flight delays. "I'll miss you," I said, kissing him goodbye at the door. "I'll miss you too," he replied. I almost admired how effortlessly he lied. Almost. As I watched him drive away, I felt something unexpected. Calm. For months, I'd lived with the fire of his betrayal smoldering beneath my skin. But now I was just days away from release. Aiden Walker was about to learn what happens when you treat the woman you're betraying like a disposable afterthought. He had no idea I wasn't just ready. I was armed with the truth. And I was about to drop it at the exact moment it would destroy him most. The morning of the wedding, I woke at 4:30 a.m. with my heart pounding. For a second, I considered backing out. Was it worth it? Wouldn't it be easier to just walk away? Disappear, pretend he never existed? But then I remembered that email. Not exactly the kind of girl you bring home. My resolve locked into place. I had spent months preparing for this. 2 weeks earlier, I'd already visited the Brooks estate under the guise of a catering staff orientation. The place was massive, old money colonial with sprawling gardens and a waterfront view. The kind of estate that gets featured in glossy lifestyle spreads. The kind of place someone like me wouldn't be caught dead in, unless it was in a staff apron. During orientation, I memorized everything. Layout, service corridors, bathrooms, emergency exits. Every inch of the venue was now part of my mental blueprint. I had studied the wedding itinerary inside and out, mentally circling the perfect window for my intervention. I'd even familiarized myself with the audiovisual setup during orientation, figuring out how to hijack the system if I needed to. That morning felt surreal. I applied my makeup in a completely different way. Thicker foundation, stronger brows, contoured cheekbones that reshaped the structure of my face. The brunette wig was high quality, styled in a sleek bob that looked nothing like my usual long blonde hair. The brown contact lenses sealed the transformation. When I looked in the mirror, even I had to blink twice. The server uniform, black slacks, crisp white button-up, black vest, further erased anything recognizable. I rehearsed my server voice one last time. A slightly higher pitch with a soft accent I couldn't quite place. My old college roommate had worked catering gigs all through undergrad, and I mimicked her exactly. Quick, efficient, polite, and most of all, invisible. In my bag, I packed only what I needed. A USB loaded with my presentation and multiple backups, a tiny Bluetooth device capable of overriding the venue's sound system, a change of clothes for afterward, and enough cash to disappear if I needed to. I parked my car 2 blocks from the Brooks estate the night before, facing the highway. Driving to the venue, I ran through the schedule in my mind again. The ceremony was set for 4:30 p.m., followed by cocktail hour, then dinner at 6:30. Stephen Brooks would give his toast around 7:15, followed by the best man. That was my moment. Right when everyone would be relaxed, half drunk, and locked in on the head table. I checked in through the service entrance at noon. I blended in easily with the other servers arriving for setup. No one looked twice. That's the thing about service workers at these events. We're expected to be everywhere and nowhere, present but forgotten. It was the perfect camouflage. The next few hours passed in a blur of polishing, folding, and arranging. I kept my head down and my voice low. The wedding coordinator, a flustered woman named Meredith, was so busy she barely checked if I was even on the roster. The head server, Jordan, gave me a quick rundown and assigned me to champagne service for the reception. "Stay sharp, but stay invisible," he said. If only he knew how seriously I intended to follow that advice. At 3:30, the photographer arrived with the bridal party for pre-ceremony photos. That's when I saw her for the first time, Natalie, in her wedding gown. It was some couture piece that probably cost more than my car. She was stunning, I had to admit. Tall, polished, and the kind of woman who looked like she was born wearing pearls. For a brief moment, something twisted in my chest. Pity? Maybe. She had no idea she was stepping into a life laced with betrayal. She didn't know her picture-perfect wedding was built on quicksand. She was being played by the same man who had mastered the art of deception. Then I saw Aiden. My Aiden. Except, he was never really mine. He looked impossibly dashing in his tux. Hair perfectly in place. That crooked smile. God, that smile, on full display as he posed with his groomsmen. He looked happy. Excited. Like a man about to start his dream life. Not like someone living a double life. My hands started to tremble. I turned away, focusing on organizing a tray of flutes to steady myself. Just breathe, Maya. A groomsman brushed past me, barely registering my presence as his shoulder knocked mine. Sorry, he muttered, eyes on his phone. It was Jackson, Aiden's best friend. Jackson, who had lied for him more times than I could count. Who had smiled at me over dinners, knowing exactly what Aiden was doing. Just another accomplice in the farce. And in that instant, I saw it all for what it was, not just betrayal by a partner, but by a whole circle that had enabled it. My humiliation wasn't just Aiden's doing, it was systemic, collective, and I was done playing the fool. Another person who helped make me a fool. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I'll give them that. I watched from a side entrance, champagne tray in hand, as Aiden and Natalie exchanged vows under a flower-draped arch overlooking the water. The sunset bathed the whole scene in gold like something out of a rom-com. A rom-com where I was the forgotten extra, the nameless collateral damage in the protagonist's story arc. I promise to be faithful to you, to cherish you all the days of my life, Aiden said, his voice calm and clear. I nearly laughed out loud at the irony. Faithful? As if he even understood what that word meant. After the ceremony, guests began moving to the cocktail area. I circulated with my tray, keeping my head slightly down, my movements smooth and practiced. A few times I passed within feet of Aiden. He didn't notice. His eyes skimmed right over me, like I wasn't even there. At one point, he took a glass of champagne directly from my tray, his fingers brushed mine, and still nothing. No flicker of recognition. I had officially become invisible to him. Natalie's father stood near the stone fountain, the center of attention, basking in the glow of his daughter's big day. I'd seen Stephen Brooks online before, wealthy venture capitalist, philanthropist, beloved Austin elite, but what caught me off guard was how genuinely happy he looked. This wasn't a business transaction to him. He truly believed his daughter had found her perfect match. There was no trace of suspicion in his expression. No hint that the man standing next to Natalie, the man he had welcomed into his family, was a fraud. That realization pierced something deep in me. Not just anger, but heartbreak too. Because once upon a time, I had looked at Aiden the same way, with the same blind hope. And for a flicker of a moment, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want justice, but because I knew the weight of what I was about to do. I wasn't just exposing a liar. I was about to destroy the fantasy of a father, humiliate a bride, shatter a carefully curated illusion. And I hated that part of me questioned it. Hated that somewhere, buried beneath all my righteous rage, was guilt. Because Natalie didn't deserve this either. She didn't deserve to become collateral in my reckoning. As cocktail hour wound down and the guests began shifting toward the reception tent, I slipped away to the back, where the AV equipment was staged. The tech guy was on a break, his laptop momentarily unguarded. It took me less than 60 seconds to insert my USB and minimize the file. My presentation was now loaded, just one click away from playing. Back in the tent, I resumed server duty, this time wine service. I kept to the edges, moving efficiently between tables. The dinner progressed. Salad, soup, entrees. Aiden and Natalie made their rounds, thanking guests, sharing smiles. They looked picture perfect, like they belonged together. Rich, polished, elite. At least that's what everyone else thought. But I saw through the veneer. I saw the rehearsed gestures, the overly staged affection, the performance. And it stung to know I used to be part of that same illusion, only I hadn't known I was acting. As plates were cleared and the DJ stepped forward, he announced it was time for toasts. Stephen Brooks rose, glass in hand, glowing with pride. He spoke of Natalie's childhood, her accomplishments, her grace. Then he turned to Aiden. When Aiden first came to ask for my blessing to marry my daughter, I knew right away he was the kind of man I'd always hoped she'd find. Honest, hardworking, a man of character. My face burned. Honest? A man of integrity? If they only knew. Then came the best man, telling light-hearted stories about Aiden in college. The crowd laughed, clinking their glasses. He wrapped up his toast with a nod toward the head table. I glanced at my watch. Almost time. As guests raised their glasses, I moved toward the AV booth. The tech guy was busy prepping music for the first dance. I slipped behind him and pressed play on the presentation, then connected my Bluetooth override to the sound system. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment Aiden Walker would finally be held accountable. The lights in the tent dimmed. Guests leaned forward, expecting music. Instead, the two large projection screens flanking the dance floor flickered to life. The first image appeared, a photo of Aiden and me together, time-stamped, smiling. One of dozens I had selected with precision. And then, I stepped forward into the spotlight. I pulled off my wig and prepared to speak. The first thing I heard was the collective gasp that swept through the wedding tent. On the massive screens, a photo of Aiden and me, taken just 2 months ago on his birthday, shone brightly against the refined elegance of the venue. In the photo, he was kissing my cheek, his arm wrapped tightly around my waist, looking every bit the devoted boyfriend. I stepped forward, still in my server's uniform, blonde hair loose around my shoulders, contacts gone, disguise dropped. I took the microphone from the stunned DJ. For those of you who don't know me, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. My name is Maya Ellis. Until about 4 hours ago, when he said I do to Natalie, I was Aiden's girlfriend. For 3 years. The silence in the tent was deafening. All eyes turned from me to Aiden, then back again. He stood frozen beside Natalie at the head table, pale and in disbelief. Natalie's confusion slowly transformed into dawning horror. I'm sorry to interrupt your celebration, I continued. But since marriage is supposed to be based on honesty, everyone here deserves to know the truth about the man you're celebrating today. The screen behind me changed. It displayed text messages between Aiden and me, sent during his relationship with Natalie. Photos of us in our shared apartment, the one he planned to secretly keep for work nights. Screenshots of bank transfers from our joint account, used to pay for wedding expenses with Natalie. The air felt thick, electric with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. I could see people shifting in their chairs, whispering, their faces painted with disbelief and discomfort. But I stood firm. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. While Aiden was planning this wedding, I said, he was building a life with me. We shared an apartment, a bank account, and what I thought was a future. Aiden took a step toward me, panic finally catching up. 2 of Natalie's cousins, large men in fitted suits, stepped into his path. Don't worry, I'm not here to cause a scene or start a fight, I said with a wry tone. I just thought Natalie deserved to know what kind of man she married. The kind of man who carried on 2 relationships for 3 years. The kind of man who spent her money on someone else. The kind of man who, my voice cracked slightly, my throat tight with emotion, planned to keep me as his mistress after the wedding. The screen shifted again, this time showing Aiden's after-marriage document. I heard Natalie's mother gasp as the words appeared. Maintain apartment downtown for work trips, overnights, and Maya. Aiden finally found his voice. Maya, this is insane. You're twisting everything. Am I? I cut him off, clicking to the next slide. Is this twisted, Aiden? Your email to Jackson, where you explained you were dating us both? How I was. What did you call me? Great in bed, but not the kind of girl you bring home to the hill country. How you were marrying Natalie for her family connections, but planned to keep me around for excitement. Jackson, standing at the bar, suddenly looked down at the floor. Several guests glared in his direction. Or maybe this is twisted, I said, switching to a photo of Aiden's lipstick-stained collar. This was 3 weeks ago. You came home to our apartment with Natalie's lipstick on your shirt, the same night you claimed you were stuck late on the Hendricks account. A long beat of silence followed. Not even a fork clinked. The weight of everything I'd revealed settled over the tent like a heavy fog. I scanned the faces, some stunned, some sympathetic, others unreadable. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I took a deep breath, my voice softer now. I want to apologize. To Natalie. To the Brooks family. You didn't deserve to be lied to. Neither did I. I wrestled for months over whether to come forward, but in the end, I realized starting a marriage on this kind of lie would only lead to deeper pain. Natalie had risen from her seat, her designer gown catching the light with every movement. Her face, calm, collected, was a mask of dignified fury. How long? She asked, her eyes fixed not on me, but on Aiden. How long were you with her while you were with me? Aiden's eyes darted between us. Calculating. Always calculating. Baby, she's clearly unstable, he said smoothly. I dated her briefly before you and I got serious. That's all. She's just blowing it up into something it wasn't. His voice was so confident, so disarmingly sincere, that for a split second I saw uncertainty flicker across the faces in the crowd. The same charm that had fooled me was now being turned on them. One last desperate attempt to spin the narrative in his favor. Then I dropped my trump card. That's interesting, Aiden, I said. Because I happen to have a recording of our phone call from just last week. You know, the night before you said you were leaving for that business conference in San Francisco, which just happened to be your wedding weekend. I hit play. Aiden's voice echoed through the tent. I'll be back Tuesday night, babe. Just a boring conference. I'll bring you something from Ghirardelli Square. Then my voice. Promise you won't have too much fun without me. His laugh, so familiar it made my chest ache, came next. No one's as fun as you, Maya. That's why you're irreplaceable. The timestamp was clear, 5 days ago. The tent erupted. Stephen Brooks shoved past the cousins blocking Aiden's path and grabbed him by the lapels of his custom tux. Natalie sank into her chair, her mother rushing to support her. Guests were shouting, filming, pointing fingers. It was chaos, beautiful, terrible chaos, and Aiden stood frozen at its center, like a man watching his empire collapse in real time. Security began moving toward me, but Stephen raised a hand, silencing them. "Let her finish," he commanded, his voice sharp and unwavering. He turned to me with a somber but steady gaze. "I want to hear everything." For the next 10 minutes, I laid it all out: the double life, the joint account theft, the carefully orchestrated betrayal. I presented screenshots, account logs, photos, emails. No emotion, just facts. Precise, cold, undeniable. The tent was silent except for the soft buzz of phones recording, the occasional gasp as each new piece of evidence hit harder than the last. When I was done, I turned to Natalie. "I truly am sorry," I said quietly. "I didn't know about you until recently. I would never have stayed with him if I had. You deserved better. We both did." Security escorted Aiden from the tent while guests recorded every second on their phones. The wedding he'd planned so meticulously, the status he'd been angling for, the elite circle he craved, it all crumbled in 20 minutes of irrefutable truth. As I began to leave, Natalie approached. Up close, I could see the redness in her eyes, but they were dry, clear. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not for how you did it, but that you did it at all." I nodded. What could I say to the woman who'd unknowingly shared my boyfriend for 3 years? "He would have cheated on me too, wouldn't he?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Without a doubt," I answered. As I stepped out of the tent, the crowd parted for me. Some stared, stunned. Others, almost admiring. Many were already typing furiously into their phones, no doubt launching what would become the scandal of the year. Outside, I caught a glimpse of Aiden being cornered by Stephen and a cluster of furious male relatives. His carefully built world was falling apart. And for the first time since I'd met him, Aiden Walker had run out of lies. I got in my car and drove away from the Brooks estate, hands trembling on the wheel. It was over. The truth was out. And in that moment, amid the wreckage, the whispers, the ruin, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. A clarity so profound it was almost frightening. I had taken back my story. And despite the chaos I had just unleashed, despite how public and messy and deeply unlike me it all was, I felt lighter than I had in months. Aiden had underestimated me. He thought I'd either never find out, or worse, that I'd be too weak, too in love to do anything if I did. On both counts, he was dead wrong. As I drove home in the deepening dusk, something settled within me. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my power, my self-respect, my voice. Refusing to be the woman Aiden Walker thought I was, someone he could lie to, use, discard, all on his schedule. It wasn't rage that filled me as I gripped the steering wheel. It was clarity. A cold, steel-edged understanding that I had survived the worst of him. That I was done being the supporting character in his perfectly crafted illusion. The next morning, the story broke on local news and spread like wildfire across social media. Bride discovers groom's secret double life at wedding reception. My phone lit up with calls and messages. Most were from friends, people who hadn't known what Aiden was doing either. I turned the phone off and stepped into a long, scalding shower, letting months of tension wash down the drain. I cried, not from sadness but release, the kind of cathartic sobs that feel like exorcising something toxic from your soul. Later that week, an unfamiliar number called. It was Natalie's lawyer. She wanted to meet with Natalie. 6 months have passed since I exposed Aiden at the Brooks estate. Sometimes it feels like another lifetime. Other days, the memory is so sharp I can still taste the champagne I served to those clueless guests. The meeting with Natalie and her lawyer wasn't at all what I expected. No blame, no bitterness. Instead, Natalie approached me with a proposal. Let's join forces, take legal action. Turns out, Aiden's betrayal went far beyond two-timing. Her family's legal team had discovered embezzlement. He'd siphoned money from his investment firm, redirecting it into hidden accounts. Worse, he'd forged Natalie's signature on investment documents. And the cherry on top? He'd taken out loans in my name. Without my knowledge. Natalie's forensic accountants uncovered everything. He didn't just break our hearts, she told me over coffee in her lawyer's office. He stole from us. Used us. And I don't know about you, but I'm not letting him get away with it. There was no trace of the pampered heiress I had imagined. Natalie was composed, intelligent, and surgical in her focus. This wasn't about vindication, it was about justice. I was surprised by Natalie. The socialite I judged from Instagram was actually sharp, focused. She had a law degree from Yale and a no-nonsense attitude. We were opposites in many ways, her crisp designer wardrobe versus my vintage finds, her composed coolness versus my fire. But we had one thing in common. We refused to let ourselves be collateral damage. Working with her legal team, we built an airtight case. Bank records, forged documents, testimonies from witnesses, including Jackson, who finally admitted to covering for Aiden in exchange for immunity. The fallout for Aiden was swift and brutal. He lost his job after the embezzlement surfaced. Word spread fast, he was blacklisted in the finance world. Criminal charges followed, and he was slapped with probation and massive restitution orders. Financial ruin. And not just financial. Personal, reputational, spiritual. The man who once orchestrated his life like a symphony now stood in the silence of his own disgrace. His parents, mortified by the scandal, distanced themselves. His so-called friends vanished the moment they realized association with him might sink them too. Last I heard, he was selling used cars in a dusty town 3 states away, living in a shoebox studio and trying to outrun his Google history. Sometimes, I wonder if he thinks about how different things might have been, if he'd just been honest. Or if he'd had the guts to choose one of us instead of trying to have it all. As for me, the experience changed me in ways I'm still uncovering. Yes, I'm more cautious now, but also more self-assured. Standing up in that wedding tent and speaking my truth, consequences be damned, revealed a strength I didn't know I had. The money recovered from Aiden's financial schemes gave me the boost I needed to invest in my design business. I now run a modest but growing creative agency, 3 employees, steady clients, and a vision that finally feels within reach. My apartment, now completely free of Aiden's presence, has become something new. A sanctuary, a space of peace, rather than a monument to betrayal. But perhaps the most unexpected result of everything is my friendship with Natalie. What began as a strategic alliance slowly transformed into something real. We now have a standing monthly dinner, just the 2 of us, where we catch up, share updates, and occasionally laugh about how surreal it all still feels. She's seeing someone new, a literature professor. Quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who looks at her like she's the center of the universe. I've been on a few dates myself, nothing serious yet, but for the first time in a long while, I'm open to the possibility. Do you ever regret it? Natalie asked me during one of our dinners, not exposing him, but how you did it in front of everyone. I thought about that. Sometimes, I admitted. I wonder if I could have done it privately, had the conversation with you before the wedding. But, would you have believed me? Would anyone have? She nodded. He was convincing. My family was so invested in the fantasy of our perfect relationship. That's why I did it the way I did, I said. Aiden thrived in shadows and secrets. Bringing it into the light was the one thing he couldn't lie or charm his way out of. The truth is, I don't regret what I did. Aiden planned to build an entire life on lies. He would have kept using both Natalie and me as supporting characters in his self-serving story, hurting more people as he went. Someone had to stop him, and I'm not sorry that person was me. Last week, I received a letter from Aiden, the first contact since the wedding. I recognized his handwriting right away. My chest tightened as I opened the envelope. Inside was a short note. I'm sorry for what I did to you. You deserved better. I hope one day you can forgive me. No explanations. No excuses, just an apology. I don't know if it's real or just another manipulation. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him, but I do know this. What happened with Aiden Walker no longer defines me. It's a chapter in my story, not the whole book. Sometimes, when new people ask how I know Natalie, since we move in very different social circles, we exchange a look and say, it's complicated. Most people don't need to hear the full story. But we know. We know that sometimes the deepest betrayals uncover hidden strengths, that the collapse of one dream can make room for better ones. And we know, perhaps better than most, that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them. Aiden showed us, and eventually, we believed him. That belief, that painful clarity set us both free. So if you're wondering whether I regret crashing Aiden Walker's wedding and turning his picture-perfect day into chaos, no, I don't. Some fires need to burn so new life can grow. Some truths must be spoken, loudly, consequences be damned, and some men need to learn that the women they underestimate might be the ones who bring them down. Dear friend, sometimes life breaks us, not out of cruelty, but to show us the strength we forgot we had. We lose people we thought would stay. We face truths that shatter our illusions, but in those moments of betrayal and collapse, we're offered a rare chance, the clarity to rebuild, not the old version of ourselves, but someone stronger, wiser, and freer. What Maya endured wasn't just heartbreak, it was erasure. Yet she rose, not in fire or fury, but in calm defiance, armed with truth. That's the essence of stoicism, not to avoid pain, but to let it carve us into someone more aligned with our worth. Forgiveness doesn't always come. Closure doesn't always arrive in neat envelopes. But liberation, that begins the moment we stop waiting for the world to make sense and choose instead to write our own. So if you're holding broken pieces right now, know this: you're not alone, and you are never powerless. Choose truth. Choose you. And if this story stirred something in you, share it. Maybe someone out there needs this reminder too.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.